On this episode, we jump into our neighborhood focus series again for Soi Suan Phlu.
So if you want to know why a nice little soy is a must-visit for food hounds and entertainment lovers, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krab and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 when I was diagnosed with dangerously low blood pressure. So my doctor recommended I go to Thailand and renew my visa and work permit without any help. And problem solved. No more low blood pressure.
Unique solution, but at least it worked.
It works very well.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago, fell in love with sitting in the back of taxis, pretending I'm in a limousine, and I've never left.
Nice.
That's really basically what I do. I just pretend the taxi driver is my chauffeur.
You carry a little bottle of Grey Poupon around with you.
A huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about how men who live in Bangkok, like Greg or I, often go way too long without buying furniture and home accessories, a discussion on how your environment can help or hinder doing work or learning hobbies, and whether or not a new demerit system for driving will actually force people to drive safer or just allow more money to change hands. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Okay, this episode came about after a suggestion from our buddy Marshall. Now, Marshall said he really likes our neighborhood focus shows. So Ed and I have already done all the hoods that we know really well, which means that any new show needs a research trip, often supported by a few beers and maybe perhaps a nice dinner in there somewhere, as Ed can attest. We do that, research for science.
Of course.
Yeah. But of course, the last few months have not been great for exploring Bangkok in the evenings for obvious reasons. But as things are now sort of kind of mostly almost opening up, we decided we could head out and take Marshall's suggestion of highlighting Soi Suan Phlu, otherwise known as Sathorn Soi 3. Now, it's a soy that many long-term expats know well, but these days it's a completely different experience than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So, Ed, let's start with the description of where Suan Phlu is and why it's played such a central role in the lives of foreigners in Bangkok back in the day.
Okay, well, Suan Phlu is perpendicular to Sathorn, so it's a soy off of Sathorn. And like you pointed out, almost all foreigners know it who've been here a while because it's where there's an immigration office that used to be the main one that most people in Bangkok had to go to, whereas now, depending on what you need, you've got to go all the way out to Chaeng Wattana to that giant building. But right. I remember I thought going to Suan Phlu was a big deal, because I lived on Sukhumvit, so you had to go across town to go to Sathorn, and then you have to go down Soi Suan Phlu fairly far to get to the immigration building. So I remember thinking that it was in the boonies.
Yeah, me too. And that's funny because this is an experience that we both had, I think, when we went out the other night looking at Soi Suan Phlu. But I remember back in the day, 15, 18, 20 years ago, that was the only immigration place in Bangkok, or it was the main immigration place in Bangkok. Right. And Soi Suan Phlu, like you said, for most people who lived on Sukhumvit or in that area, it was a hike because not only was it a long ways to get down there because the subway wasn't around back then, but it was also like, I just remember it being a really long, dusty, crappy soy that you had to sort of wander down.
Yeah, I don't know if it was, maybe it was because like every time we went there, we knew we were going to immigration and we were in, like it was, I thought it was kind of a depressing soy. Now around immigration, there were like, copy shops and places to get your photos taken. And there were always like some restaurants, but in general, it was a pretty grim place. Just like when you're in immigration and you're waiting in these huge sweaty crowds, that was the feel of the whole Soi.
That's a really good point, because the only reason you would go down
That's
there
right. That's right.
is because you were about to waste half a day dealing with maddening Thai bureaucracy and, smelly foreigners.
Yeah.
And
it used to be it was the waiting
upset.
room. Yeah, it was the waiting room of immigration. That's what Soi Suan Phlu used to be.
Right. So the only reason you would go there was because you were about to have a crappy day.
Right.
So that's probably why my memories of Soi Suan Phlu are not so positive.
Yeah. For sure.
That's right.
But it's interesting. Before we get into the specifics of what happened there, you and I, we talk a lot about Sukhumvit, and we talk about the back sois of Sukhumvit kind of being fascinating, where there's just all kinds of stuff on the back sois. Like you can go down a back soi in Sukhumvit and come across like a beautiful house, right? Yeah. Or you can come across essentially like a slum, where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know this was back here.
Right. Or like a nice restaurant with like a nice little pasta restaurant with big floor to ceiling windows or something.
Yeah, like the back sois of Sukhumvit are there's incredible variety, but we don't talk about the back sois of Sathorn. Sathorn is I don't know it as well as Sukhumvit, and maybe there's not as much stuff, but just it's a fair, Sathorn. If you go from Brahmaphore to Sapan Taksin, Sathorn is pretty long. Right.
Yeah, it is.
And there's sois on both sides, especially the side that Suan Phlu is on. But that's a huge area. Like the Sathorn area is huge.
Yeah, I think for generalization purposes, we can call that area back there, sort of a bit further back from Suan Phlu, is called Yen Akat.
Yen Akat, right? And it's giant, man. And there's just hundreds of small streets, hundreds.
Yeah, and it would be a multi-year task to catalog them all and walk down them all.
That's right.
Because every soi has 5 more sois branching off of it, and who knows where they go.
Yeah. Again, I think these sub-sois, it's like a warren of little streets. I think it's one of the best things about Bangkok. And
yeah, totally.
And that doesn't mean that all the sois are places you want to hang out. Some of them are pretty grimy, and sometimes you're just like
pretty dodgy places.
Well, yeah. Well, sometimes you go down like a sub-soi and then you turn right and there's someone living in a hut. So it's
right. A bunch of rabid dogs or something.
Yeah. But it's interesting, and so Suan Phlu is a good example of one of these that used to have like a function. You just went there for like a functional purpose, but then apparently gradually over the last 15 years, it's just gotten a whole lot cooler.
Yeah. Now, I had 2 main takeaways when we went out the other night. Now, of course, we have had our meetups throughout last year. Actually, we didn't have any last year because we had our first meetup in 2020 was like 3 months ago, right? So in 2019, we had several meetups, and they were always at Smalls, which is a really great place. We'll talk about that in a little bit on Soi Suan Phlu. So it's not like we weren't totally unfamiliar with it.
Right. I mean, Smalls has been around for a while. In a way, maybe Smalls was the beginning of Suan Phlu becoming cool.
Maybe.
Do we know? I don't think we know when Smalls opened, but it's been a while.
It's got to be 6, 8, maybe 10 years.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. But I think in a way it was kind of the beginning of that area getting cool. Now, one caveat that Greg kind of mentioned before is going to Suan Phlu right now is probably not the best time, because even though the city is kind of reopening, there's still no alcohol sales in bars or restaurants.
As of today recording, but I'm hearing that might open up in a few days. But
that would be great, man. I think that's the. I mean, in a way, it's kind of sad, but it does seem like alcohol sales just drive social life in the evening. It's just
I mean, this is totally off topic, but our former guest and our friend Jared, who owns Soul Food Mahanakan, they're closing down indefinitely, like at least 3 months. Because they just can't deal with it. It sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the alcohol sales. It's like they've got to restart them. I'm not sure. You and I have done the pro-con lockdown stuff, but I think at this point they should restart the alcohol sales and just see what happens to the COVID numbers, because things seem to have stabilized.
Yeah, but Smalls, speaking of Smalls, is towards the beginning of the Soi, and that's one of the first like social things that you see when you enter the Soi. But as we noticed when we were there the other night, it was closed as well, so they're not doing too well. But the two takeaways I came away from Soi Suan Phlu with was, one, this Soi is way shorter than I remember it being. and two, it is way cooler than I remember it being.
That's right. I mean, it just it's just changed, and but I do think it's an example of something changing slowly, and it just seems like much more of a community or neighborhood than I remember. I mean, maybe it was this, and we just didn't notice it because we were just so pissed off when we were there. But it does seem to be, like now there seems to be Thai people hanging out, but then also enough farangs there that you're not really in the middle of like a super Thai neighborhood. So it's farang friendly, but it's not copy shops and photo shops like back in the day.
Right. They had a pretty good little scam they're going, because you would go into immigration and they'd be like, oh yeah, you need 7 more copies of this page.
Right.
There's a convenient little photocopy shop right outside.
Yeah.
There was like
those shops
did, or whatever.
Those little photo shops, they did gangbusters for sure.
Yeah. But as we were walking down Soi Suan Phlu, like the first couple hundred meters is, by the way, the whole Soi is 850 meters long. I measured on Google Earth. The first probably couple hundred meters are big hotels and service departments and residences and stuff like that. So there's not a lot there. But like you said, back in the day, I'm sure it was a nice little community, but we just didn't notice because we were grumbling. But it's a really hip little community now. And that's the one thing I noticed when I was walking down. I'm like, this feels like a little cozy community.
Yeah,
it feels like
it's not
everything is here that you need.
Yeah, okay. It's not super gentrified, so it's not like it's got 5 really slick cocktail bars that charge $400 each. It's not like that.
No.
It seems to just be on its way up with cool little coffee shops, restaurants, a couple bars, like smalls, and a pleasant mix of mostly Thai, but still kind of farang friendly neighborhood.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the word gentrification, because we were talking about that. And I was thinking that obviously not all gentrification is equal, because compared to what it used to be, Soi Suan Phlu has been completely gentrified. But maybe not completely, but it has been gentrified.
Right.
But then when you compare it to something like Thong Lor,
right, it's not like
which has been thoroughly gentrified.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to Thong Lor, Soi Suan Phlu is still kind of like a hick out of the way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But compared to Soi Suan Phlu 10 years ago, it's way slicker than it was.
It's just not so upscale, and it's not appealing to only wealthy people. Though, like the problem with Thong Lor and Ekamai is they just went so upscale that everyone, it's the luxury problem in Thailand, I think, where just a huge number of businesses are just aimed towards the 0.1%, So it's cool.
Well, even in a recession, rich people still have money. So.
That's right. Yeah, no, Suan Phlu is definitely quote unquote down market, but that's great. I mean, it's cozy. It looks like fun. It's active. It's like, even though there's no alcohol sales and stuff, it would seem pretty busy. Like there's tons of street restaurants, people hanging out.
Yeah, there was a little community market there on the street that reminded me a lot of the Din Dang market. Like this incredibly buzzing little thing, fruit out on the sidewalks and people walking around and selling and buying stuff. And most especially if you're down there, we have to mention Soi 8. Soi Suan Phlu Soi 8.
Right.
And if you're walking down towards the end and you turn left into Soi 8, it's like this little knot of street food, really good noodle food. There's a woman that sells really good khao kamu there, the stewed pork leg with eggs and stuff. But one of the things, one of the places I want to mention is this place called Uncle John.
Right.
Like this sit down restaurant on Soi 8. And it's got a really interesting history. I don't know the guy himself, but apparently I'm assuming his name is John. But he used to work as a chef in some top tier hotels, like some big 5-star hotels. Mm-hmm. And he sort of quit and opened up his own little place. So he's got some serious cooking skills with a Z. And the food at this place is really, really good. In particular, I remember the pomelo salad being dynamite.
Nice. Well, I didn't eat there, but it's got a killer menu, and it's a good example of that area being kind of farang friendly, with English on the menus and stuff like that.
Right, but right outside Uncle John, you've got guys, taxi drivers and local people sitting on little plastic stools, chowing down on, pink noodles and what have you. So it's a real cool mix.
Yeah, across the street I saw a vegetarian place. Now, when we were there, it was closed, but it's kind of cool that there's some representation down there.
Vegetarians represent.
That's right.
Yeah. And there's also a little mini branch of El Mercado, which is this. I'm not sure if you said you've never eaten there, though.
No, I've seen it, but I'd never gone in. But you and I checked it out.
Yeah, the original location of El Mercado, just off of Rama 4, back sort of across from the Queen Circuit Convention Center. Really, really cool European food, and they have like a little mini outlet there too, which has got some nice sort of jarred and bottled food that is nice too. I was expecting it to be bigger, but again, maybe it's not gentrified enough yet to warrant a giant European eatery. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that just speaks to the fact that it's still very much a local place.
Well, you and I both liked the whole neighborhood there. I mean, with the caveat that it's not at 100% because we're still in this semi-lockdown. The other thing about it is I would say there's not a lot of different things to do on the Soi. Like I think if I was an expat who'd never been to Suan Phlu, what I would do is I would plan to go late afternoon, early evening, and check out all the street food. I would plan on chowing down. I would walk around and then maybe hang out at Smalls. To me, that would be like a Suan Phlu great introduction.
Yeah, that sounds like a good evening. I could do that. That sounds like something that, not even if you were new, that sounds something that I'd want to do.
Lot of street food. I mean, a lot of street food.
Yeah, it's great. The interesting thing about it, though, is because like the main Suan Phlu Soi that goes from Sathorn all the way down to Ngam Du Pli, which is another interesting Soi that might warrant its own little mention here on this show. But I'm looking at a Google map right now, and there's not a hell of a lot of Sois that branch off from it. But the ones that do branch off from Suan Phlu, the ones that do are really, really narrow, like one way for cars. Like there's no room for two cars to pass each other. And then once you start walking down them, like you said, it's either like small but nice condos and stuff, or a dude living in a house made of tarp.
That's right. You know, this whole area, whatever we call it, like I guess we could call it Yen Akat, right? There are some quite good restaurants that are not too far. I guess you could walk it if you had time, but this would be like a short cab ride. So on Yen Akat Road, which is just kind of deeper in, so you can't quite get there directly from Soi Suan Phlu. You have to kind of walk down Suan Phlu, turn right, turn left, and turn left again. But Yen Akat Road has a bunch of stuff on it. It's got a bunch of restaurants and bistros. But I'm a big fan of a restaurant called Mama Dolores, which is Mediterranean food. And that includes all Mediterranean food, from Italian food to stuff like Lebanese or Israeli, like Middle Eastern food. And I would say, it's a 5-minute cab ride and maybe more like a 25-minute walk. But I can recommend Mama Dolores.
Yeah, that's a great place. And the thing is too, again, you're looking out on Google Maps and it's this massive area. There's probably dozens and dozens of awesome little restaurants back there that I don't know about and probably will never know about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool area to explore.
Yeah. One interesting thing too, because if you look on a map, if you go down to the end of Soi Suan Phlu and turn left, it looks like there's a really nice little park there. And it's called Suan Phlu Park. But one thing you'll notice when you go down to the end of Suan Phlu and turn left, there's like a sign over the road for the Civil Aviation Department. And that park, I'm not sure if it's off limits to people, but that's where the Department of Airports is, and there's some military associated buildings down there. Aeronautical Radio.
So that's
Thailand.
Not really like a great park to hang out in.
No, and there's a couple of street view things there, and I dropped a pin to look around, and it's basically like a giant concrete slab with a couple of trees sticking up in it. But there does seem to be people walking around, but it's kind of weird because if you drive down Suan Phlu and turn left, you have to drive around this park. Like there's a road going through it, but no cars are allowed in. So it's like this little dog leg around this park
Weird.
That looks quite nice on the map, but is actually just a big concrete slab. And actually I did some reading on this too. The immigration department that we used to go to is still very active, but apparently now it serves two purposes. It's specifically for Laotian, Burmese, and Cambodian people to get their visas sorted out. And I think it also acts as the immigration prison.
Yeah, I think that's right. I remember that because I remember reading newspaper stories about it. There's a detention center. There's an immigration detention center there, right?
Yeah, and that's a place you read about where, like, it's not the happiest place on earth. Some refugees are stuck there and they can't get out, and they're with their families, or they're separated from their families, or something like that. So it's kind of got a bit of a bummer vibe about it.
Yeah, you could say that.
But yeah, so we used to go there, but apparently the place is very much still active, just not with us now. We got to go all the way up to the giant UFO building in Chaeng Wattana. So, the funny thing is about this, it's a really dense little soy with a lot of places to stop at, but like we could just sort of keep talking around in circles, but I think we've covered it. It's just a really cool little soy.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's there's not a lot of cool bars you could hang out at, but you definitely got smalls. Then there's definitely other places to grab a beer along the soy. But I would say, go at night when people are out hanging out, and I would say make it a street food extravaganza. I like it. I don't hate Chinatown because Chinatown is so unique and cool, but it stresses me out, man. It's so busy and chaotic because you got the traffic, you got the people, you got the lights, and so this is. But there's killer street food in Chinatown.
Right. Yeah.
So this is way more chill than that, even though it's buzzing. There's activity, but it's just, to me, it would be significantly less stressful than
That's
Chinatown.
An interesting way. So it's like Chinatown light.
I think so. I mean, obviously the food's going to be a little bit different, but I mean, Chinatown's just so unique. But I don't know. I really don't. It's Chinatown is intriguing, but it stresses me out when I'm there, man. It's not. I don't really like it. I don't really like hanging out there.
I can see that. It's like you have to take a deep breath before going in. Like, all right, cover me. I'm going into Chinatown.
It's chaos, man. It's chaos.
Yeah, this is a little bit less chaos. And I'm thinking back now, too, back before the pandemic and all this crap hit us. There was some pretty good live music down on Soi Suan Phlu as well. A lot of the bars and restaurants spilled out onto the streets. So when things get back up and running again, I'd say it's a prime destination for people to head down and have a fun night.
Agreed. Two thumbs up.
So there we are. 2 thumbs up for Soi Suan Phlu. Thanks, Marshall, for reminding us to check it out. So if you have a neighborhood that you want us to check out, listeners, let us know, because we've done most of them that we're really familiar with, but there's always new places to explore, and that will just require another couple of drinks and a nice dinner, perhaps.
Right.
On the podcast credit card. We'll expense it.
I'm in.
I wish that was a thing. Cool. All right, well, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week, it is my turn. So, Ed, we've been on some bike rides together. You've been walking around Bangkok a lot. It's hot here.
Definitely.
Got to drink a lot of water. When you go into 7-Eleven or another convenience store, what's your opinion on the cheap drinking water? Like the big plastic bottles
interesting.
that are like 3 baht a bottle, as compared to like the Nestle ones, which are 9 baht or something.
Yeah, no, this is a good question, only because it is just one of those things that my attitude has changed over time on this. Because I'm just the classic kind of person who, in general, I'm buying cheap stuff. I'm like, there's no point in getting that. That's just a brand name. But for some reason, God, how did I get hooked on it? Okay, bizarre little story, but I actually needed some super distilled clean water because I was mixing black and white inks for my photographic printer. So it sounds crazy, but I needed distilled water, like from a chemical supply company, and I didn't want to go there. And I did some internet searches, and I found the website, the Thai website for Nestle's like pure water.
Okay.
And it explained how it goes through like 7 layers of distillation and purification and carbon filtering, and it sounded cool. And so I used it for this little project when I was mixing inks, right? But it sounded so cool, I just started drinking it, and now I'm only drink that expensive stuff.
You're a Nestle man through and through.
Yeah, I mean, I only drink, but it's funny because I've done a complete 180 on it, man. I'm
really?
I'm the exact kind of person who'd be like, "Don't pay for that." Are you, you know what I mean? And then I don't know if it was their marketing or I was just impressed. You know, I can't remember if it's like 7, it might be 5, but I don't know, maybe it was just their website was good, but they went in extensive detail about how purified, like I think it's just called Nestle Pure. And I sound like, you know, I'm in an ad, but I'm really just a happy customer.
That's funny. Well, our buddy Derek used to call these things like the cheap water. He used to call it the people's water, which I think
no, that's about right. That's about right. No, but I would have been.
Water.
I started out preferring the people's water. I guess I'm not. Maybe I've gone elite. I've become gentrified.
Gentrified. Your ISO water tastes.
Seriously. Now, not Evian or something imported. No way. So I'm middle class. No. I'm okay. I'm lower upper middle class. All right. You know, I'm not an imported water guy.
Right. Your water table only has 4 legs, not 9. I'm the kind of the same way. You know, when it comes to food, like I've had that people's water before, the cheap water, and I can't tell any difference. But it's like when it comes to stuff that I'm drinking and eating, obviously I'm not like the healthiest person in the world. But I think there is a threshold where you're like, you know what, I'll pay an extra couple of baht for
right
for something that I know is probably decent. Right. You know, it's like when you go to an all you can eat buffet barbecue at some, you know, Thai joint on a dusty road, and it's like 300 baht all you can eat pork, and you're like, probably gonna skip that, you know.
Yeah, probably not the best pork in the world.
Probably some questionable meat there, you know. Like I'll pay 600 baht for this. That's fine.
Right.
So
understood.
Yeah, I think I'll live with it, but I think when it comes, if I had a choice, I probably would not drink.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to say I would loathe that water. I'm not that much of a snob, but I pay for the good stuff now, man.
That's right, man. You get to a certain age, you're like, I want good water. I've lived my life.
I've become that guy.
Right. I'll have a nice Sauvignon Blanc and the Nestle Pure water, please. Cool. All right.
Okay. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yes, we do. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can chat with us online or reach out to me directly on Twitter or Instagram, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Stay safe out there. I'll see you back here next week.
Absolutely. See you next week.
My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 when I was diagnosed with a dangerously low